The jungle wakes slowly, long before the first light. Above the canopy, the world remains completely still. The mist hangs low, unmoving, like a held breath. Then somewhere beyond the trees, the darkness begins to thin. It feels as if something ancient is watching from within, and it has been waiting there for a very long time. There is a fragile moment just before sunrise, a moment when the rainforest seems to hold its breath. The birds have not yet filled the air with sound. The insects pause and even the leaves seem frozen. Then above the trees, a stone pyramid takes shape. It rises out of the mist like a memory returning. It was not built for tourists or for cameras. It was not waiting quietly for the modern world. And yet somehow, across centuries, it still seems to watch. For generations, outsiders told one simple version of this story. They said the Maya vanished from the face of history. One day, a brilliant civilization stood here in full power. And then, almost overnight, it was supposedly gone. The cities became empty, swallowed slowly by the forest. The temples fell silent beneath vines, rain, and roots. A calendar was turned into a prophecy of destruction. A civilization became a mystery buried under green leaves. But what if that famous story is deeply wrong? What if disappearance was never the real mystery here? What if the real question is far more uncomfortable? Not why the Maya disappeared from their own world, but why the rest of us needed to believe they did. Tonight, we follow that trail back into the jungle. Through broken monuments, royal names, and carved inscriptions. Through drought records hidden in lakes and caves. Through battle scars left in stone and human bone. Through reservoirs, causeways, fields, and living languages. Through cities that measured time with astonishing precision, and yet could not escape every pressure they created. This is not a story about magic or aliens. It is not about prophecy, curses, or vanished gods. It is about power, water, memory, and survival. And it begins with a civilization that never truly left. When people say the words the Maya today, they often imagine one empire, one ruler, one capital. A single civilization marching toward one dramatic ending. But the truth was never that simple. The Maya world was a vast and changing network. It was not one kingdom ruled from one throne. It was many cities, many dynasties, many ambitions. So we have to begin with the map. The Maya world stretched across a huge region, across southern Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula, across Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. It was not a nation in the modern sense. It was a landscape of powerful competing city-states. Each city had its own ruler and court. Each had its own gods, history, and political dreams. Tikal rose out of the lowland jungle. Calakmul watched from the north like a rival shadow. Palenque clung elegantly to the edge of hills. Copan became a city of sculptors and royal memory. Caracol challenged neighbors far larger than itself. Chichen Itza came later, different and connected to the sea. Some of these cities were bitter enemies for centuries. Some were bound together by marriage and diplomacy. Some rose slowly, ruled for generations, then faded. Others grew stronger precisely when their neighbors weakened. They built all this without iron tools. They had no horses to carry stone through the jungle. They did not use wheels for heavy transport. And still they moved enormous blocks across difficult terrain. They raised temples taller than the surrounding forest canopy. They carved their history directly into pale limestone. Not vague legends, not fairy tales, not symbolic myths. Real events, real names, and real dates. They developed one of the most advanced writing systems ever created in the ancient Americas. They tracked Venus with extraordinary mathematical precision. They predicted eclipses and cycles across long spans of time. They built reservoirs capable of storing millions of gallons. They terraced hillsides to support growing urban populations. They engineered causeways through swamp, forest, and stone. Their cities were not accidents of geography. They were designed landscapes, carefully shaped by human will. They made power visible in stone, water, and ritual. And yet the outside world reduced all of this to one haunting question: where did they go? That question sounds innocent when we first hear it, but hidden inside it is a dangerous assumption. It assumes a civilization exists only when outsiders notice it. Only when palaces are full and monuments are fresh. Only when kings still carve their victories into stone. The Maya force us to challenge that assumption. Their cities changed, and their political order fractured. But change is not the same thing as disappearance. To understand them, we must stop searching for vanishing and begin looking carefully for transformation. Every great story needs characters to carry it forward. But in this story, the characters are not only people. They are also forces pressing against an entire world. The kings come first in the surviving record. Maya kings did not simply govern cities. They claimed to connect the earth with the sky. Every monument they raised repeated one political message: This dynasty is ancient, sacred, favored, and unbreakable. They commissioned stone designed to outlive their bodies. And in that stone, they tried to outlive doubt. Then come the scribes, guardians of dynastic memory. They preserved royal histories in complex glyphic inscriptions, so precise that centuries later, scholars could read them. They recovered the names of individual Maya rulers. They reconstructed birth dates, victories, defeats, and humiliations. Then come the farmers, often invisible in royal art. Their labor fed the cities every single day. Their fields mattered more than any palace throne. Without them, the pyramids were only empty stages. Then come the priests and the astronomers. Often, these roles belong to the same educated elite. They watch the sky as a calendar of power. Not decoration, not superstition, but political timing. They read seasons, rituals, wars, and planting cycles. Now the cities themselves enter the story. Tikal and Calakmul locked in bitter rivalry. A cold war unfolding across almost 2 centuries. Palenque, elegant and intellectual, carved into a hillside. Copan, obsessed with sculpture, dynasty, and royal identity. Chichen Itza, later indifferent, looking toward trade. A new kind of power, less dependent on lineage. And then there is water, the force no king could command by decree. Rain arrived only when the climate allowed it. Dry seasons had to be endured, not negotiated. A full reservoir in June could be gone by March. Forests cut for cities changed how land held moisture. Soil pushed too hard became thin and exhausted. Thin soil meant weaker harvests across wider regions. Weak harvests turned private hardship into political crisis. Political crisis made war more likely and more desperate. Modern archaeologists arrive last in this investigation. They are detectives walking into a cold scene. There is no confession waiting in the ruins. There is no single weapon lying beside the body. Instead, they find pollen samples and isotope traces. They find lake sediments stacked like pages of climate memory. They find LiDAR scans revealing cities hidden under forest. The clues are scattered across stone, bone, soil, and water. And the answer refuses to become one simple sentence. A Maya city was not just a pile of stone. It was a living machine made of many systems. A machine of people, belief, labor, and landscape. At the center stood temples and royal palaces, but that ceremonial core was only the beginning. Beyond it were neighborhoods filled with ordinary homes. There were markets, workshops, kitchens, courtyards, and roads. Causeways connected districts that once seemed separated by jungle. Further out lay the fields that kept everyone alive. Everything the city depended on was spread across the landscape. Then came the water systems, quiet but essential. The great reservoirs were not background infrastructure. They were the reason some cities could exist at all. During the rainy season, water filled the system. During the dry season, stored water became survival itself. Now imagine Tikal at the height of its power. Perhaps 60,000 people lived in and around it, all dependent on reservoirs and a carefully managed watershed. Imagine the ruler standing above the great plaza. Below him, thousands of people gather in ceremonial order. Behind him, carved stone proclaims his dynasty eternal. Ancient, favored, victorious, and chosen by cosmic forces. Above him, the sky moves in perfect cycles. The city is designed to make power feel inevitable, as if hierarchy were part of nature itself, as if the world had always been this way. But systems that appear permanent can still be fragile. A reservoir does not fail dramatically at first. It silts up slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. Then one dry season, the stored water is not enough. A harvest weakens just as a rival attacks. A trade route shifts away from the city. A ruler loses the confidence of his people. A monument that once announced power and certainty becomes a reminder of promises that were broken. This is where the Maya story becomes uncomfortable. Their achievements were real and deeply impressive. Their mathematics was genuinely sophisticated and ambitious. Their architecture was extraordinary in scale and design. Their astronomy was accurate, patient, and precise. But brilliance does not make a society immune. Sometimes brilliance makes the pressure harder to see. Because the stone remains magnificent for centuries, long after the system beneath it has cracked, the pyramid still stands above the green canopy, but the water that sustained it may be gone. No monument can force rain from the sky. No inscription can refill an empty reservoir. The reservoir tells the truth the king cannot. Centuries later, lake sediments tell it again. Layer by layer, season by season, stress appears. The landscape remembers what royal monuments tried to hide. The Maya also wrote history in stone, not vague legends or symbolic decorative patterns. They recorded real events, real names, real dates, births and deaths of kings and queens, military campaigns, defeats, rituals, alliances, and sacrifices. For a long time, outsiders looked at those glyphs, and saw only beautiful decoration carved into monuments. Interesting patterns, mysterious signs, nothing more than ornament. Then in the 20th century, scholars began cracking them. The breakthrough came slowly, piece by difficult piece. Then faster, as the system finally began to open. And suddenly the ruins started speaking. The voice that emerged surprised almost everyone. The Maya were not peaceful stargazers outside history. They were political actors in a competitive world. Hard, strategic, ambitious, and sometimes ruthless actors. They made alliances when alliances served them. They broke alliances when power shifted elsewhere. They captured enemies in war and public ceremony. Those captives were displayed before the watching population. Power had to be seen, staged, and remembered. They fought wars that lasted across generations. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul spanned 2 centuries. Cities paid tribute to stronger neighbors when forced. Scribes wrote the winner's version of events. Every time the stone served political memory. And they used every tool available, including the sky. The sky mattered deeply in Maya political life, not because the Maya were irrational or primitive, but because the sky gave order to the world. The movement of Venus had ritual significance. The solstices divided time into meaningful moments. The sacred calendar linked human action to cosmic order. A king launching war at a calculated moment was not acting randomly or superstitiously. He was performing power inside a measurable universe, and the Maya could measure that universe remarkably well. Their astronomical tables tracked cycles with impressive accuracy. Their Venus calculations were precise across long periods. Their architecture framed celestial events on ritual dates. Buildings could align with sunrise at specific moments. Knowledge and power were inseparable in Maya cities. The astronomer priest and the political strategist overlapped. To know time was to command authority. Then there is the famous calendar myth. And here we need to be very clear. The Maya did not create an apocalypse countdown. They created interlocking cycles of time and meaning, a system that was intellectual, ambitious, and culturally profound. The long count calendar measured enormous spans of time. It reached millions of years in both directions. It did not end the world in 2012. It completed one cycle among many others, like one century ending and another beginning. Modern popular culture preferred the apocalypse version because apocalypse is simpler than complexity, and complexity forces us to ask harder questions. What actually happened was not supernatural. It was more disturbing because it was human. Before we go further, we need to clear the air. There are 4 myths that distort this story. 4 persistent myths that make the Maya easier to misunderstand. The first myth is that the Maya vanished. It is the most common version of the story, and it is also the most wrong. The Maya did not vanish from history. They were never gone in the first place. Millions of Maya people are alive today. They live in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. They speak more than 30 Mayan languages. Their communities remain living, active, and complex. Their traditions did not disappear into the jungle. Yes, some ancient cities were abandoned. That part of the story is true. But the abandonment of a city is not extinction. A city can fall without a people ending. The people did not follow the stone into silence. They moved, adapted, remembered, and survived. The second myth says the Maya were peaceful stargazers, a people untouched by the violence of history. The glyphs have destroyed that myth completely. They reveal politics, rivalry, captives, war, and strategy. The Maya were not outside historical conflict. They were deeply inside it. Drought, inequality, ambition, and rivalry all mattered. These were not just external disasters that struck them. They were pressures created within the system itself, and not every pressure could be resolved in time. The third myth says aliens built the cities. Let us be direct about this. That myth is not curiosity at all. It is an insult disguised as wonder. Its hidden assumption is deeply ugly. That indigenous people could not have built such cities, but they could build them, and they did. The evidence is everywhere in the archaeological record, in tool marks left on carved stone, in quarry sites and unfinished construction sequences, in mathematical planning visible across the architecture, in the labor systems that move materials through terrain. Human beings built the Maya cities. Indigenous people with skill, knowledge, institutions, and endurance. The fourth myth says the calendar predicted apocalypse. It did not, and that matters. Modern fear turned a time cycle into a marketing event. The Maya predicted no end of the world. Some inscriptions reference 2012 as a ritual anniversary. Not a terminus, not a prophecy, not extinction. Now we turn away from myth and toward fact. Fact is harder because it rarely gives one villain. There was no single disaster and no single cause. The classic Maya decline was a pattern. uneven, regional, and spread across roughly 2 centuries. In some places, monument carving came to a halt. In some places, royal courts dissolved into silence. In some places, populations declined sharply. In others, daily life continued in altered forms. And in other regions, new political centers rose. The ruins are not one clean crime scene. They are a landscape of accumulated stress signals. And now comes the central twist. The most dramatic part of the Maya story may not be the fall of great cities. It may be the survival happening outside our frame. When we focus only on palaces and pyramids, we mistake political collapse for cultural silence. A king stops carving monuments into stone. A plaza empties and ceremonies disappear from view. A dynasty drops out of the written record. To us, looking from outside, that feels like the end. But perhaps we were watching the wrong thing. We were watching stone instead of people. Stone cannot move when a system fails. But ordinary people can move when survival requires it. Farmers can leave exhausted fields behind. Families can join other communities and begin again. Languages can survive without royal inscriptions. Memory can travel without carved monuments. Culture moves on 2 feet, not on staley. The great classic cities belong to the Maya world, but they were never the whole Maya world. Their decline was uneven across time and space. Some places suffered earlier than others. Some places transformed instead of disappearing. Some sites were reoccupied after long intervals. Some became places of memory and pilgrimage. That makes the story more unsettling, not less, because civilizations do not always end like movies. There may be no single final dramatic scene, no one day when everything suddenly stops. They can fail slowly in chapters, one institution at a time, one reservoir at a time, one alliance at a time, one road, one harvest, one promise. Each failure creates conditions for another failure, until finally the accumulation becomes visible. But by then the stone is already silent. And by the time everyone agrees danger is real, those who warned about it may already be gone. Archaeologists found the warning signs much later. They found them in pollen records. They found them in reservoir sediment. They found them in patterns of population movement. They found them in bones marked by malnutrition. Even before the last monuments were carved, the warning had been there all along. It just was not written in royal stone. It was written in the landscape, in soil, water, pollen, and absence, in trees that were cut down and did not return in time. There is a better word for what happened. Not disappearance and not a simple collapse. The better word is transformation. Profound, painful, uneven, and irreversible transformation. Some cities failed under the weight of pressure, but the Maya as a people did not. That is the twist at the center of the story. That is what the stone alone cannot tell us. And that is what we almost missed. So why should this matter now? The ancient Maya lived more than 1,000 years ago. Their great cities are ruins under the forest. Why should this history still concern us? Because the Maya story asks an uncomfortable question. What is the relationship between intelligence and vulnerability? Can an advanced society still become fragile? The Maya answer is yes, absolutely. A society can build astonishing monuments. It can map the sky with precision. It can organize labor on a massive scale. It can create art of extraordinary beauty and still become vulnerable to its own pressures, especially when power stops listening to limits. Climate stress alone did not write the whole story. Politics mattered just as much. War mattered just as much. Inequality and competition mattered as well. Choices mattered because people made them. Individual decisions compounded into systemic failure. Environmental pressure becomes most dangerous when it meets rigid institutions, when it meets competition for status, when leaders must appear invincible at any cost, when no one can admit the reservoir is running low, when rulers commission more monuments while the city needs more water. There is another reason this matters deeply. Calling the Maya lost is not just inaccurate, it makes living people invisible. It turns a continuing culture into a museum exhibit. It suggests history belongs to ruins, not descendants. But the Maya world did not end with classic cities. It changed, adapted, fractured, and continued. The Maya world is not only beneath roots in stone, it lives in languages spoken today. More than 30 languages carry that memory forward. Languages that hold knowledge of land and seasons, of history, ritual, family, and the cosmos. It lives in communities with their own governance, in ceremonies connecting present lives with ancient memory, in textiles where patterns carry cultural meaning, in political struggles for land, rights, and recognition. The ruins are not empty because a people disappeared. They are empty because cities are not people. A city can die, but a culture can move. A language can survive in millions of mouths. Long after a palace throne room collapses, That distinction is not a minor technical detail. It changes everything about how we tell the story. It changes how we read the ruins. It changes how we speak about decline. It changes what we owe to living communities, especially when telling the stories of their ancestors. The most dangerous myth is not alien builders. It is the myth of vanishing. Because the vanishing myth is comforting, it places the Maya safely in the past, far enough away that they cannot challenge us, where they cannot interrupt our version of their story, where they cannot say, "We are still here." At sunset, the stones begin to change color. Amber light warms the limestone surfaces. The jungle grows louder as the day closes. What looked abandoned begins to feel occupied again. Occupied not by ghosts, but by memory. The Maya left behind pyramids. They left behind glyphs and calendars. They left behind roads, reservoirs, and questions. But perhaps their greatest legacy is a warning against simple stories. No, they did not vanish in one night. No, the answer is not aliens. No, the answer is not prophecy. No, the answer is not one disaster. The real story is more difficult. And because it is difficult, it is more human. Power rose across the lowlands. Systems stretched beyond safe limits. Environments shifted under growing pressure. Wars intensified between ambitious cities. People adapted when institutions failed them. And memory survived where monuments fell silent. A ruin can make us think we are seeing death. But sometimes we are looking at transformation. The jungle did not erase the Maya. It covered the evidence under roots and shadow until we were ready to read it carefully, more honestly and with greater humility. Maybe that is the real mystery after all. Not that ancient civilizations can fall, but that we so often misunderstand what remains. We look at ruins and see endings, when we should be looking for continuations. The pyramid is still there. The language is still spoken. The memory is still carried forward. We were looking in the wrong place. We were asking the wrong question. The real question was never where they went. The real question is who they are now, and whether we are finally ready to listen. Because listening is where the old story finally breaks. Not in the ruins, but in the present. In the voices that were never truly silent. In the communities that carried memory without monuments. In the languages that survived conquest and forgetting. In the names still spoken across mountains and forests. In the ceremonies that outlived kingdoms and capitals. In the knowledge passed quietly from generation to generation. The stone can show us what power wanted remembered. But people show us what history could not erase. That is why the Maya story is not finished. It is not locked inside temples or museums. It is still moving through the world today. Every ruin is only one chapter. Every glyph is only one surviving voice. Every silence in the record asks for humility. Because what disappears from archaeology does not always disappear from life. The forest covered the cities, but it did not bury the people. The monuments stopped speaking for kings, but memory found other ways to survive. So the mystery changes shape. Not where did they go, but why did we stop seeing them?